ne-a venit evacuat afară. La ora 7 dimineața a venit buldozul, n-am ales cu nimic decât cu un pat.
Kralovnia! Živa Kralovnia!
The results of the recent European election confirmed a distinct shift to the right, with Austria, Denmark, France and the UK all electing parties with anti-immigration policies.
We have won a national election in this country.
One of the latest waves of migrants taking the heat for right-wing scaremongering across Western Europe are Romanians and Roma gypsies.
But I would also point out you're in denial over Romania and Bulgaria. Those countries are racked with corruption and organised crime. We in UKIP do not believe it's right and fair for unlimited numbers of people from those countries to come to Britain to work, but also if they want to claim benefits. We don't want those people coming into our country.
Since the lifting of EU border restrictions on people from Romania earlier this year, the media has been full of scare stories suggesting that Roma are headed for wealthy European countries like the UK, hell-bent on borrowing and stealing their way around Fortress Europe.
The negative image of Roma has been around for centuries. People fear the Roma because they're different, because they threaten to question what our rules are. They're seen as lawless and ruthless.
As the law change loomed, Roma communities all over Britain were suddenly finding themselves under scrutiny.
I'm on my way to an area of Sheffield called Page Hall, which has been at the centre of a media storm. Apparently there are racial tensions in the area and the Roma community there are getting flack for it.
Originally descended from India, as a people, Roma have never had a country of their own, and to this day endure systematic persecution by European regimes. Page Hall is home to 3,000 Roma originally from Slovakia, who until recently had been minding their own business.
Veľmi je dobrá kráľovňa. Ďakujeme, že môžeme tu všetci Rómovia. Ďakujeme za všetko kráľovne. Živa kráľovňa!
But when former senior British government minister David Blunkett made some comments about racial tensions in the area, the media reported that if the Roma didn't change their behaviour, there'd be riots. The anti-Roma rhetoric favoured by the British tabloids has been feeding off stories such as Collins, a local chip shop owner who made a lurid claim about some of his Roma neighbours. His story was picked up by papers and TV across the country.
I was stood there, Nicola was stood here at Fridays, and he says, do you want to buy this? So I looked down like, and it was a 3-week-old baby. So I looked back at him, waiting for punchline or joke or laugh. 250. It's not very often you get somebody coming and offering to sell you a baby.
Would you say to maybe the media who would describe your attitude to the Roma as racist?
How can I be racist? My wife is from Sri Lanka. They make out as though they don't know what you're saying, or they don't understand, or they can't speak English. We get them coming into the chip shop and they go, well, I've broke that down now to how much is small fish and chips.
Do you know much about where they came from?
No, I don't. Yeah. I'm trying to make a living here running a fish shop. But when they stand outside spitting, that's when it gets up my back. Do not spit in front of this shop.
I don't think we should let them in. We all pay taxes and we pay into the system. These Slovakians and Romanians that are already here, they're taking out in the system and not putting anything back in. When they first come over, they used to knock on the doors and ask if you wanted your gardening doing. And they did do a good job. But the same night, they came back and pinched all my shovels and my tools.
So it feels like what was once a white working class area, then some generations ago became a South Asian working class area, is now just going through another societal change. The arrival of the Roma is causing problems which is stemming from people who aren't ready for change.
Calling on Roma to change their culture and change their behaviour. Now we don't do that in relation to any other ethnic group. That would be completely unacceptable. And the Roma are considered fair game because they are the weakest in society, and because we have a history depicting the Roma in a way as outsiders, as a threat to the community, and often as a threat to themselves. They're issues of perception, they're not problems that are caused by the Roma. The Roma are not a threat, not to themselves, not to others. The threat is the prejudice that exists against Roma.
I was invited into the home of a Slovakian Roma who'd moved to the UK with his family to escape discrimination. Page Hall wasn't exactly prime real estate, but I'd heard it was a far cry from life in Slovakia.
Can you tell me about why you moved from Slovakia?
Na Slovensku som proste bol bez práce a proste sociálne úrady ako sa poje, hej, nám pozastavili sociálne dávky. A v tom páde sme nemali šancu ani na živobytie, ani na byty platiť, ani na nájom, nič také. A tým pádom sme prišli tu bývať, ako za lepším životom, hej. 100-krát som tu šťastnejší. Na Slovensku, keby som bol doteraz, tak deti by nezískali žiadne školenie, nič. Aj to, ale aj to, že deti sú rómske a tým pádom ich dávajú do osobitných škôl. A deti vychádzajú len akurát základnú školu a tým pádom končia. A tu majú budúcnosť deti veľkú. Prácu nemám, som zaregistrovaný na job center, ale už od marca neberiem ani korunu job center, nič. Stále mi dávajú sankciu, ale dôvod není, prečo.
How are you managing to support your family?
No, zarobím si ako sa dá. Chodím na fúšky, dakedy mám fúšku, dakedy nemám vôbec.
Is there anything that you miss about Slovakia?
Nič.
How terrible can life be for Roma in Eastern Europe? Some of them have already chosen to come and sleep rough in London or migrate to the UK's run-down inner cities.
Roma have a very difficult history in Romania. The Romani population was enslaved as late as the second half of the 19th century, and the marginalization and discrimination of Roma continues.
We'd heard about a growing trend of forced evictions of long-established Roma communities across Romania. There'd been a new eviction case in the Black Sea town of Eforia. After a 6-day notice, authorities removed 100 people from homes they'd been living in for 30 years, demolished them and left the families to fend for themselves on an open wasteland. Amnesty International have called it a violation of human rights. I met up with a local English-speaking Roma called Elvis, who agreed to take me to a derelict high school where half of the evicted community had been told to go by the mayor.
How many people are living in here? And how many people per family?
15 with kids. Here a little rock from up in
Something fell off the ceiling on the baby.
Ne-a venit evacuat afară. La ora 7 dimineața a venit buldozul, n-am ales cu nimic decât cu un pat.
Deci păcând cu copiii.
Did they say you can come here?
Ne-au băgat provizoriu aici. Deci așa a fost problema, provizoriu. Deci o zi, 2, 3. După o zi, 2, 3 s-a făcut multe zile.
What's this?
Uite, buletinele de acolo, de pe strada aia. Uite aici. 17 ani de când stau eu aici.
How can the mayor claim that these are fake?
False, eu nu știu. Era poliție de vină. Cu ce scoteam eu actul ăsta? Că vrea originalul. I-am adus originalul.
They've got a newborn baby in there. When they say we feel like we're treated like dogs, I can see that 100%. Elvis took us to the address the woman had showed me. One family remained. They couldn't bear to leave the land they'd inhabited for 30 years, so they'd built a makeshift shack where their old house used to be.
Lalo! Lalo! Aveam 2 camere, aveam bucătăria, aveam ce trebuie la casă, nu știi? Ea este bolnavă, are hepatită la ficat.
What's to stop the mayor tearing this house down?
Până mâine domâlează, Mercu domâlează. A zis, du-te în pis, da-mă de aici de unde ai venit. Când mă duc acolo să mă ajut tu, să-mi dai casa, să dorm acolo.
Știm că aici nu-i de muncă, vrei de muncă și nu există.
Evacuările mie îmi sună așa ceva. Eu nu fac evacuări, eu fac desfințări de construcții ilegale. Terenul respectiv aparține comunității, aparține orașului Eforie.
What about the inheritance papers they were showing us and the IDs that were registered to that address?
Cele buletine și care s-au prevalat în momentul respectiv, ulterior n-a mai existat și le-au făcut buletine pe propria lor răspundere. Au zis ei că stau acolo și că sunt ale lor. Dar asta nu scuză cu nimic faptul că au construit ilegal peste un teren care nu le aparține. Deci o respinge. De ce? Pentru că nu se simte în siguranță alături de ea, pentru că îi fură, e murdar, deci atunci apare, ei se autodiscriminează rămânând la un stil de viață.
The mayor then showed me his dossier that built a broader case against the Roma, which boiled down to illegal rubbish dumping and unlicensed food selling on the beach. These low-level crimes seem to have no connection to the Roma's legal right to live on the land. And the mayor's arguments seem to contradict themselves. On the one hand, he says the Roma should go home to the addresses on their ID cards, but then he also says that ID cards are worthless. To find out more, we headed to Romani Chris, an organisation dedicated to defending the rights of Roma.
It's not only the Roma who are in this situation, but it's always the Roma who get demolished, because if this law was to be, so-called law would be applied to the others, probably half of the constructions in Romania would have to be demolished. The land in Romania, it's not being probably registered, and that's the fault of the state. So the state said, we're gonna issue IDs for people who live there for many years. These people live in those localities since before World War II. How much time do you want to pass before you're considered a resident of that town?
But it's not all doom and gloom. The mayor has come up with a low-cost alternative to the community's post-eviction housing needs. He's providing them with 4 walls and a roof on a spacious plot of land.
And this is for one family to live in, all together, the parents and the children?
Yeah.
It's better than what they had before, but it's definitely not great. What do you think of this, if this was going to be your new home?
Aici noi nu stăm.
De ce?
Noi de aici nu avem mutație. Aici îmi place, dar să stau. Dar acolo nu-mi place.
Mutație, nu aveți buletinul de eforie?
Nu avem.
What's worse is this is not an isolated case. Evictions like these are happening to Roma all across Romania.
What have you heard about these containers?
Ale nu-i pentru noi, pentru alții, care are pula mai mare.
To add insult to injury, plans are afoot at a national level to enshrine Roma marginalisation in law.
So I've come here into the corridors of power to meet a member of parliament called Mircea Dolha, who is trying to make a questionable amendment to the constitution which will state that ethnic Roma can no longer call themselves Roma, because apparently it's confusing Europe, who are assuming that all Roma are Romanian. Why are you proposing this amendment to the constitution?
În limba țigănească, cuvântul rom înseamnă cuvântul om, iar ei au găsit această formulă de a se autointitula rom și cetățenii români se simt frustrați pentru că în Europa foarte multe probleme pe care le produc cetățenii aceștia țiganii sunt imputate românilor și englezii și francezii cred că rom înseamnă român, ori nu este așa. Însă cuvântul rom nu este potrivit și noi ca români trebuie să ne protejăm, să ne apărăm până la urmă această denumire, pentru că am câștigat-o istoric vorbind de câteva mii de ani.
Sunt și romi care muncesc, nu discutăm, doar că proporția este mult mai mare a celor care comit infracțiuni și sunt cerșetori.
Nu, ăștia nu au. Ăștia numai ca să meargă să cerșească, să fure.
From the parliament to the streets, there was widespread hostility towards the Roma. It turned out Elvis had already been to the UK and hadn't had the best experience.
So Elvis, how long have you lived here?
Since I was born. 24 years. M-au sunat niște băieți din Buzău și mi-au spus dacă vreau să muncesc în Anglia. Am acceptat imediat oferta, mi-au spus că e o spălătorie de mașini care oferă în jur de 40 de lire. Când am ajuns acolo, locul ăla de muncă nu exista. Ideea era că trebuia să mă pună să merg în magazine să fur.
Elvis was arrested, but with the help of a human trafficking NGO, he was able to return to Romania. Faced with eviction and marginalisation at home, it's hardly surprising that given the opportunity, Roma would want to try living in the UK. For Elvis, the EU law change couldn't have come any sooner. He can't wait to pursue an official route to the UK to start a new life with his new wife.
A lot of the people in the UK, they worry that Roma don't want to work and they're just going to come to the UK to take advantage of the welfare state. Any of that true?
I will answer very honestly on this question. There are going to be a lot of Roma people who are going to come for client to benefits. But also there are a lot of Roma people who really want to work. No one see the Roma people who really love to work. Everyone see, oh, a gypsy steal something, a gypsy make that, a gypsy make that, but no one see good things.
What have you got in your jacket?
Joacă câinele.
My time with the Euphoria Roma was nearly up. Before we left, they wanted to show me how they scrape a living. They pick scrap metal from rubbish dumps to sell for a pittance. But this practice is illegal, meaning that one of the few things helping them survive is the same thing reinforcing their bad reputation.
Mai aruncă cu mașinile de acolo, ia de acolo. Da, uite cu aici, mai săpăm, mai stăm aici la fer, mai aruncă aici jos, la lumea fiare. Adunăm 40-50 de kg, de 300.000, 400.000. Că vreau să plecam și eu în afară, în țară, încolo, să muncesc și eu, că m-a săturat de viața asta aici în România.
Do you like doing this? Da? De ce vreau să muncesc și eu?
Having spent time with these Roma in Romania, it was clear to me that while moving to the UK would undoubtedly provide anyone the opportunity to live beyond a life of poverty, unfortunately for the people I met, who have no access to basic healthcare, education, employment, or even food, whilst they may dream of a better life in the UK, and many Brits might fear their arrival, it seems highly unlikely they have much chance of getting there.